Audio Jungle.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex stepped down from royal duties last year and moved to the US. They have signed multi-million-dollar deals with streaming giants Netflix and Spotify and taken part in other public activities, such as their interview with Oprah Winfrey and Harry's mental health documentary on Apple TV+. Now they have left royal life behind, they will have to pay for their own lifestyle and must be hoping that interest in them can pay the way. However, veteran broadcaster Marcy McGuinness appeared to pour cold water over this by arguing the interest in Harry's late mother Diana was on another level, and that interest in Meghan and Harry cannot even compare to it. Ms. McGuinness is the former London bureau chief at CBS News and was in charge of that operation on the day the Princess of Wales tragically died in a car accident in Paris. She told that this was the biggest news story she had ever worked on at the time, and that the fallout rumbled on for weeks. Reflecting on how those across the pond felt about Diana, she said, "She was so famous in the world that, I mean, Americans loved her, they really loved her. They loved the relationship she had with those boys, William and Harry. They identified with the tragedy she went through with the divorce and all of that stuff and Camilla being part of the marriage. All those things. Americans just wanted to know every detail." When asked whether the interest in royals remains to this day, she said, "We certainly see a lot of interest in the royal family, nothing compared to Diana. I think Diana was in a class of her own. I think there is interest in Harry and Meghan. There is interest in William, less so interest in Charles. Meghan and Harry. It's interesting, but it's not on the scale as Diana, for sure." Ms. McGuinness added that she thought the interest in Harry and William was largely due to their connection to Diana anyway. She said, "I mean, she was just so in love with those two boys and I think everybody just loved the way she was with them, so the interest in them stems from the interest in her." The former news chief added that, when Charles becomes king, there will be some interest but not a huge amount. He argued that a much more interesting story for Americans would be if William became king instead. She said, "When Charles becomes king, it will be a big story, but it's not something that people on the street will be, 'Ooh, did you hear Prince Charles became king?' When that happens. You know, if something happened to Charles and William became king, that would be a big story, because people would remember all that stuff from Diana. Would come back again. And I think if and when he becomes king that will be a much bigger story." Ms. McGuinness recently contributed to Joe Garner's podcast We Interrupt This Broadcast, which takes an in-depth look at the biggest events that took place in the broadcast era. The 12-part series, which has spawned a second season due for re-ease in the autumn, examines such events as JRK's assassination, the 9/11 attacks and other earth-shattering stories, told by the journalists who were reporting on it at the time. Ms. McGuinness appears in Episode 7, The Death of Princess Di, which documents what happened the night Diana died and the extraordinary fallout of her untimely death. Ms. McGuinness outlined her own involvement and gave her pertinent take on the events. Speaking to Express after the release of the episode, she said, "I've covered breaking news my entire life and nothing hit me like that until 9/11 came along, but until 9/11 this was the biggest story I had ever covered. And I was in charge of it in London and so the pressure of it was enormous and wrapping it around the emotion and the tragedy of it was very difficult to deal with. I can remember the very last night, when we'd got off the air, when we had covered her funeral and we did another special that night, and I can remember just sitting in my chair. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning London time, 2-3 o'clock in the morning because New York was on the air with it in prime time. And all of a sudden tears were just coming out of my eyes. I think it was all that pent-up emotion that I was holding in because I had to be in charge of a big news story, so I think when it was finally over, I was just spent emotionally,